Episode 135.
Are we there already?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
When
Numbers
do you
coming.
think, not that we're good, but when did it start getting easier to come and do the podcast? Thinking about it last night, actually. What number? It was after 100. I think for me personally, I've enjoyed doing the podcast more since after that, like 120 mark.
Yeah.
It, all the way up to there, it was a major challenge.
Yeah, since then it's definitely gotten a lot more, I suppose, easier to get into every week.
Yeah.
And do. That was from what? About the beginning of the year?
I think so.
Yeah, somehow just clicked.
Clicked is a little bit easier to,
Yeah.
I think, the prep and also actually just executing the show become a little bit easier.
Yeah. Took us a long time to get there.
They say it normally takes like 10 episodes or something. Yeah.
Took us 100.
Rosebery and Parrock took 120 episodes.
I've never professed to be the fastest learner in town. So,
Shit.
but
Yeah.
look, still love it. I mean, here we are. It's a public holiday today.
Yeah.
And, man, glad to be at it.
Absolutely. All right. Story of the week. Revenge of the Birds.
What's going on?
What is going on?
There's been... What, this week?
Well, yeah, I've got it up here. So we've got a Fly Dubai. That was 2 days ago. Then there was another 2 days ago, Arsenal women's football team had a bird strike. American Airlines 737 bird strike 3 days ago. Commute Air and Bryan Air 145. That was 4 days ago. Nairobi runway closed. That was on April the 17th. And it just goes on and on and on. Let's go Fly Dubai one.
Yeah.
It's just all over the place.
It's crazy.
Absolutely nuts.
And it's not like it's in one particular location. It's worldwide. The birds have they've got it in for Aries, but I see they've got a big affinity for Boeings.
Yeah, it looks like it.
Is that because there's more Boeings flying, or is just do Boeing engines taste better to birds, or what?
Yeah, I don't know. Look, put it this way: all the videos that are out there about this, they're quite spectacular in a way. A lot of them filmed from inside the flight deck, inside the cabin at least. These big flames popping out, and we can joke about it, but it's quite a serious thing. Why are there more bird strikes?
I don't know.
Or they just reported more, or what?
I suppose that's the thing. But I mean, I've noticed just in the last week or two, there's been
a significant amount.
Yeah, a huge increase in the stories about it. So you tend to think like, what the hell is actually going on?
Yeah, so revenge of the birds. But I want to take a slightly different angle to it, because tied to this whole thing is an article that came out, Ryan, from Captain Sully, and to do with training and the direction that he's a little bit worried about training is going. And what he's basically saying is, please don't reduce the amounts of training that pilots do.
Yeah.
Because there's a big push around the world to actually try and limit the existing training that is actually happening. So this is a article by Captain Sully, and I also want to get it clear. Often, like, at the time when this whole Hudson River thing happened, amazing and awesome, but I'm more of a Sully fan because of what he's done post that accident or that incident. Because article goes on to say, in dark back rooms and dark corners, airline lobbyists, particularly with the Regional Airline Association, are scurrying all over Washington, still trying to undo all the hard work that has been done to make air travel the safest form of transportation in human history. They want to try cheapen pilot training and levels of experience for their own financial gain and expedience. Once again, it is necessary that those of us who deeply understand that safety really must be the priority are having to refight the same battles that we have had to fight too many times before. This time around, lobbyists are trying to weaken pilot experience requirements by seeking super credits for certain training experiences, and in doing so substantially lower the number of actual pilot flying hours required. When pilots have only a few hundred hours of flight experience, it means they have experienced only one cycle of seasons as a pilot. This I quite liked. So what he's saying is, if you've only got a couple of hundred hours, you've only been through one winter. You've only dealt with the thunderstorms once. You know, you need to experience those things multiple times before you are competent in that area, whatever area it may be. The lobbyists are pulling out an old debater's trick, posing a false choice between quantity and quality of flight training and experience. They're trying to convince us that if the quality of training is good enough, then less of it should be required, when in reality, we can and must have both. So he's calling on everyone who flies to loudly and forthrightly tell the airline lobbyists that we're on to them and there's subterfuge and we're not having it. We are not going to allow them to turn back the clock to the days that not so many years ago when there were dozens of airline crashes resulting in hundreds of deaths each year. One message is clear. Pilots must have the aptitude and diligence to strive for excellence and become the best of the best, and we must arm them with the knowledge, skill, experience, and judgment necessary to handle whatever challenges they will face. High levels of pilot training and experience literally make the difference between success and failure, life and death. And in safety-critical domains like aviation, everyone involved must have a deep understanding that just good enough isn't.
Couldn't agree more.
Huh?
Couldn't agree more. I mean, I'm right behind him on that one. I mean, you cannot afford to dilute the training for pilots.
No.
I mean, we see it here on a daily basis. It's just, you know, what are they thinking?
It's non-negotiable.
I get it. You know, training is expensive. It's very difficult now to pull pilots out of the roster to send them for training, etc., etc.
Yeah.
But these are the people that are keeping your airplanes flying. They're keeping your passengers safe. They are earning your airline an income.
Mm-hmm.
Don't fuck with their training.
Mm-hmm. It's crazy.
No.
But I think you brought up the most valid point there. Take money aside. It's the time required out of the schedule that's hurting the airlines at the moment, particularly the regionals.
Yeah.
Because they've got to take pilots out their schedule, do their training. They're not available to the line. It causes chaos, and that's why they're trying to reduce this, or at least lobby to see what they can achieve.
Yeah, I just think that they're dipping their toes in the wrong water because, I mean, you know, the guys are stretched thin as it is, and I feel very strongly about that. They shouldn't be messing with China. I mean, there's probably just the right amount of training going on at the moment for most places.
Yeah.
You know, if anything, I would advocate that there would probably be a need for a bit more.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I don't think that's a fight they're going to win too easily, to be honest.
Well, only if people stand up for it and fight it. Now, this is where I want to talk about it from a pilot perspective a little bit, because we've been pilots in an airline and we know what it's all about, and sometimes going for training can be a bit of a schlep, and you know, you also get to a point in your career, and a lot of people that listen to our show, fortunately, are these guys that are flying long haul, big heavy metal for big airlines overseas, and they've been through extensive training throughout their career at many different airlines, and those guys have had the luxury, I suppose you can call it, of having training done by, you know, local airline here in South Africa and this sort of flagship carrier wherever they are in the world.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that they can draw parallels along the way where certain things were good and this airline and that airline. But at the end of the day, don't you think the type of training that we go through yearly, doesn't that make our jobs as pilots that much more credible and that much more in demand? Like, if you dilute that, you take that away, you dilute it by just say you don't have to go for recurrent twice a year, you go for once a year or something like that. You dilute it just a bit. It takes away that credibility that you've earned as an airline pilot over the years. And just like I'm speaking about the podcast, saying it took 120 episodes to get confident with the podcast, don't you think it's a little bit like that with flight training too? How many recurrence does it take before you actually are getting the full benefit out of the training? Whereas at the beginning, you're trying to get the box ticked so you can carry on working and carry on earning a salary.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it takes a long time and a lot of V1 engine cuts and a lot of failures and reading the QRH and going through all these abnormal items to actually get to a point where you're now confident to deal with anything that this instructor or the aircraft can throw at you. And you've got to get to that point. But the only way you can get to that point is by repeatedly going to training and do more training and more and more and more, because it's not just going to come naturally. You've got to put in the time.
Well, it's just like you said from that Sully article. Low hour pilots have only seen one season of everything.
Yeah.
Exactly what you're saying is if you've only seen one season of simulator recurrent, you haven't done enough. You need at least 2 or 3 seasons of that until you've got the simulator thing
sorted
under the belt. And like you rightfully said as well, you start getting the benefit from the actual sim sessions where your RAM, so to speak, is wide enough and free enough to actually absorb and take in a whole lot more things than see in the sim. That makes you a better pilot. Yeah.
And you need to do the training for that.
You have to.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, how many times hasn't it happened to you? I know it's happened to me once or twice where I've just come back from simulator training and I'd be online in the airline and an event would happen. And funny enough, on 2 occasions, I was presented with a situation that I'd actually experienced in the sim session a month or 2 before. Yeah. And I was like, I'm so glad we did this exercise because the outcome might have been different.
Yeah, it gives you the confidence. And I suppose, what is training all about? And I get a lot of questions every week from youngsters in the sort of GA side of things doing their comms and asking about, what happens, what's the difference between what they're doing and what an airline pilot does. And I think the biggest thing there is training. There's a steep increase in I wouldn't say the quality of the training, because it's not like the quality of the training at flight schools is bad by any stretch. But the training is totally different.
Yeah,
it's a totally different type of training that you get. And I think, that's what separates pilots from a lot of other industries. That's what makes us professional, the fact that we continually train, we continually testing ourselves. And as you said, make a valid point there about having RAM available to actually learn. When your RAM is taken up by you've got so much going on, you actually leave that sim session or whatever training it was thinking, what the hell just happened?
Yeah.
But over time, it does get easier. You do start absorbing more. And eventually you get to the point where every single time you go in there, you can actually try something a bit different or see if this works and that works. And I love that. I think it's brilliant.
Look, man, ultimately, a well-trained crew is... it's a financial investment into the airline because those pilots have the confidence and the knowledge and the ability to make better decisions.
Yeah.
They're not going to turn around necessarily for something that they can think through properly and make very good sound decisions on, perhaps get the operation done. I mean, let's take it out of the context of just purely dealing with emergencies and getting an airplane on the ground safely. Something happens. The guys get taught in the simulator to assess things, make decisions, think about it.
Yeah.
And ultimately, if one can afford to get the job done, complete the mission, they're saving the airline a lot of money.
Yeah.
And again, that boils down to training. So again, it becomes a bit of a moot point to the lobbyists, I would say, to try and dilute the training.
Well, I hope so. And I hope that the NTSB and everyone else who will be involved in all this, take the side of where Sully's taking and, speaking and, go up against these lobbyists and say, no ways, we're not going to back down. And the fact that there's a shortage there, maybe they need to sweeten the deal of being a pilot as opposed to trying to, reduce things like training. It's just ludicrous that that's the angle. But I suppose in the world today, with the nonsense that you see out there with everything that's happening. I mean, we had this whole last couple of weeks talking about, the Bud Light advert. I don't know if you've seen that whole thing.
Yeah, you were telling me about it.
Just
I
ludicrous.
Can't believe it.
Ludicrous. I mean,
Yeah, it kind of does go down the lane of being woke.
It does. And also, it because you can get away with so much these days and you can you can basically go and do and say anything you want, and then, put a facade up and say, we're doing it for this particular reason. Just like they said there, using the point that, well, the training must just be better, then you need less. It's ludicrous. It's like saying, don't go to gym and train that hard, just take steroids.
Yeah, and the end result for a lot of those guys is pretty spectacular, isn't it?
Yeah. There's just no room for it there. It's just pilots, the responsibility. And I think this is downplayed a lot. And speak about this, particularly when new crew members are doing command upgrade training and things like that. And I think to those GA pilots that are asking questions about airline training, something like a command upgrade course is something that the type of thing we're speaking about. That's a course that is, designed to give the captain the tools that he needs or she needs to be able to command an aircraft in a safe and efficient manner. And that's a course purely designed to assist with that very thing. It's not a case of, we just do this course to tick a box. We're actually doing that course so that we can make that pilot better at that particular role that they may be going into. So, yeah, I hope, Brian, that gets nipped in the bud very, very quickly.
No, me too. I couldn't agree more. I mean, we can't afford for that kind of bullshit to start infiltrating our industry.
No. All right, next story. So Revenge of the Birds, obviously Bird Strike Sully, bit of a tie in there, and that's why we went for that story. News this week on the light side, Ryan, something that did come out, the NTSB, they've released an uninformative prelim report on that United 777 Maui dive.
Oh yeah, I didn't see that
incident the other day. So
what was the outcome?
It says bugger all. It just simply doesn't say anything. And yeah, there's a few questions to be asked because let's not forget. So this aircraft had a vertical speed of 8,600 feet a minute, both descending and climbing after it departed the airport in stormy weather. So it's no minor little incident, this. The aircraft then landed. They did a bit of a brief inspection. They took off again and continued to their next destination. Now, nothing has come out. The Boeing haven't said anything. The NTSB weren't even going to investigate this. It didn't pop up on their need to investigate list. So it's a lot of missing points here. The crew were experienced. It wasn't to do with training. There was something there that happened, and they haven't been able to quite put their finger on what it was. And this prelim report says nothing. It doesn't explain anything.
You know what I just remembered? Duncan actually put this out in Fly Africa a couple of weeks ago, but that video by that mentor pilot on that Kenya Airways crash a couple of years back.
Yes.
And just thinking about it now, having watched that basically was as a result of very poor training standards, not so. There were holes in that Swiss cheese that could have been covered up long ago.
I think that was a combination of training and just horrendous flying.
Yeah, and bad attitudes to boot. But I mean, that kind of falls in line with exactly what we're talking about today.
It is. Duncan, while you're talking about that, because I actually commented on that post and I just said, isn't it sad that, particularly in the captain's case, because the first officer there was brand new.
Yes.
And isn't it sad that in the captain's case, that during a simulator evaluation, it wasn't picked up that this guy was poor? Because there seems to be more evidence to suggest that this guy just was off the reservation when it came to flying in general.
Yes.
And then, of course, had this scenario where they didn't even realize that the autopilot was not engaged and, led to this crash. And I find it sort of horrendous that it wasn't picked up during sim evaluations. We're talking about training here today. But Duncan commented, and rightly so, and said, what happens is these guys act like very, very well behaved during sim training. They go and do everything perfectly. And, of course, they get all the boxes ticked and they get their license back to go operate for another 6 months. So in that case, you kind of look at what are we doing in the training? Are you actually, I know it's split between training and evaluating, but a lot of these guys do put on a bit of a facade when they go and do their evaluations. They act like the good boys and do their job well and get their license. But theoretically, I would hope that an evaluator would be able to say, hey, this guy is not fit to be flying passengers around.
That is changing now, I think. The way the training is being structured nowadays with new ideas and sort of what's the frameworks from.
Yeah, you would hope.
I think that should improve.
Yeah,
hey?
I think so.
Yeah.
One for you here, another story, Ryan. Growing private charter market prompts an increased demand for flight crew. Do you agree with that?
1,000%.
Yeah.
You're seeing it. I mean, the charter market is being depleted of pilots at a rapid rate. Obviously, the guys are being swallowed up by the airlines here. Seeing it in South Africa. And, it's a bit of a concern because the charter companies are busy.
Mm-hmm.
There's a huge demand to get passengers connected to these lodges and stuff, to all the airstrips that the airlines can't service. And, there's a massive need for the charter companies. And, where are those pilots going to come from?
Yeah, where are they going to come from? Do you think that if you look at you take South Africa, the aviation market here, and for years it's always been, if you're flying for a charter company, you will progress to one of the regionals and then you would go across to an airline at some point, be it in South Africa or anywhere else in the world. Now, everything that we're reading, certainly when researching stories for the podcast, to suggest around the rest of the world, unless you're at one of the main big carriers in the States, it's a different story because you're there because you're earning big money. You want to be there because you're earning really, really good money these days. But a lot of what we're seeing is all about go work for an airline or go work for a charter company that fits into your lifestyle and the quality of life that you want. And do you think we're maybe a little bit behind the curve here in South Africa where you can find a guy that's got a job with a good charter company or a good broker or something like that has actually got a pretty good gig going on, but because of the mentality, you sort of say, well, no, I should be progressing to an airline and now's my time to go. And you take a guy and he's got a charter job, but now he's got an opportunity at Airlink, he's got an interview, and boom, he's gone to Airlink. I know he's probably going to get paid more at Airlink, and I know the opportunities that, I'm using Airlink as an example, but opportunities will become more because you've got a decent type on your license and all the rest. But I'm taking someone that wants to stay in South Africa, is committed to staying in South Africa, and you've got a gig at a charter airline. It's probably not the worst job in the world. And the reason I'm bringing it up as well is one of the other questions that comes up all the time is, what do you suggest I do after I've got my comm?
Yeah.
Now, today is very different to what it was 10, 15 years ago. When you got your comm, you had to go fly for a charter company or a contract company. You had no choice. But would you change it today for yourself? I mean, would you have wanted to have missed out on that chunk of your career? I look back at the early charters that I did at the beginning of my career. Those were by far the most enjoyable flights I've ever had in my aviation career. And I certainly would not want to take those away. So I don't like giving the advice to a youngster. No, look, finish flight school, go get a rating on a decent aircraft and go apply straight away at your Airlinks and Safairs and go and get a job. Okay, because you're going to miss out on that chunk of your career. But on the other hand, we've gone into this world like a little bit more of the European type way where you finish your flight school, you get straight onto a 320, straight into an airline. So you are basically training to become an airline pilot, Whereas in South Africa, things are still a bit different. You're training to become a pilot, and then what you do afterwards is up to you. You want to go fly contract, corporate, charter, whatever you can. But the opportunity now is there for low-time people getting into decent airline positions. But you do miss out on that little gap of charter flying, which is a hell of a lot of fun.
No, couldn't agree more. There's nothing I would change about the way my career developed. The early days of flying in the bush and doing charters and a bit of contract flying and medevac and corporate, all that. That was just so much fun.
Yeah.
Absolutely loved every single minute of it. And I enjoyed the airline. But I mean, I saw it with a lot of guys that used to operate an airline with. They always spoke fondly of the old King Air days, and what they did, or some guys from the Air Force, I guess. There was always that fondness about what they used to do before they joined the airline. Because let's face it, I mean, the airline flying does become a bit monotonous after a couple of years. And I think there are a couple of guys now that have gone back to the charter sector, and they're absolutely loving it. Obviously, not earning the same money by any stretch of the imagination, but the quality of flying, the fun that they're having, and there's a bit of a freedom to that sector of aviation as well. You're not as governed by, the structures of the company.
Yes.
Most of it's like very small organizations, get your info, sort of things out yourself,
yes.
and you go. A lot of fun in that, and I do agree. By leaving flight school and going straight into an airline, you are losing out.
Yeah, I think so.
The fun that you can have, and just the general experience. I mean, it's pretty cool. Flying a caravan or a King Air into the bush, you're sitting there waiting for your passengers, and there's lions roaming around.
Yeah,
I don't know.
There's something about it.
The adventures that you can have as a charter pilot. Yeah, so.
Let me throw a curveball, not a curveball, but what happens if you reverse engineer it? So what happens if you say, I'm going to go to flight school and I'm going to, as soon as I can, I'm going to go get a job at a decent airline. I'm going to build up some hours, and as soon as I've got enough hours, I'm going to go get myself into an Emirates or one of these big carriers, Cathay or something like that, while the opportunities are here. Because let's face it, the opportunities are here today, but we don't know. There might be another Corona hoax that comes along or something and stops it. So the opportunity is here at the moment. So you have your mind set on, I'm going to get into a big airline as soon as I possibly can. And you go fly for that big airline. You fly there for 10 years. You put enough USD away in the bank. And then you come back and then you say, right, so who do I want to fly for here locally that I can actually go and enjoy my next 15 or 20 years, or maybe, even if it's 10 years left of aviation, and not be bound by, I must think about where I'm going to move my family next. Do I have enough money to move? And, not having it all be about the salary. The salaries are increasing. Yeah. And I hope we can. There's another question that just comes up, and I said we'll try and do something on this, is to try and answer the question, what can you expect to earn when you leave flight school with the com? And does it vary between, an Airlink and Safair and Semair and the likes? And it does vary. It absolutely does vary. And if you're after just the money, then you must look in one particular direction. If you're after building hours quickly, it doesn't matter which one of those three that you're at. You're going to build them as quick as legally you can.
Yeah.
So you need to think carefully about where you want to go, and possibly, reverse engineer it and say, well, I need to get into an airline while the opportunity is there. Build up the hours, build up the airline training knowledge that you need. Yeah. And then later on in life, go and fly wherever you want and do what you want.
I think there's so few guys that actually take that approach. A lot of guys that have been flying for years and years and years in the airlines eventually, I think, get tired of it. And then when they leave that type of job, they're done.
Yeah.
They've been everywhere. They've seen enough hours in the sky.
And they don't want to do it.
And then they're going to do something else. Yeah. The other thing that happens is, I think it's very difficult to take a guy who's been flying in the cushiness of an airline with all the creature comforts and, to now all of a sudden adapt and become a sort of a bush pilot per se.
Mm-hmm.
loading bags yourself, filing your own flight plans, sweating your nuts off in the bush.
Yeah. So you're saying it works? It works in one direction, but not the other.
I wouldn't say it doesn't work in the other direction. It's just you're not going to find that many guys coming back from the other side. I don't think.
Yeah, possibly you're right. This number quite interesting. Yeah, predicting even further into the future, Boeing has reported that by 2041, globally the demand for new pilots will reach 602,000, and for new cabin crew 899,000. Safe to say that a large part of these professionals will be working for private, business, airline, and charter sectors. That's a huge amount of pilots, and obviously thinking a bit ahead there. But how they come up with these numbers, I don't know, and what happens with the whole single pilot ops and all the rest, we also don't know. Interestingly enough, and just to comment on some of the comments from last week with the single pilot ops, is the opinions from guys at different airlines scattered around the world. So all, a lot of guys that we know, so a lot of South African guys, but very differing ideas of how single pilots operations is going to work if you're based in Hong Kong flying for Cathay, Emirates pilots, or guys flying in Europe. And of the European guys that commented that I spoke to, they all 100% convinced that you'll be flying your 350 as a lone solo pilot.
Really? Yeah,
like how I kind of envisioned it. But then I had a few guys from Cathay making the point, but isn't single pilot ops going to be for maybe longer haul flights where only during the critical phases you'll have two pilots, but for the non-critical phases of flight you'd have one pilot? And to me that makes quite a lot of sense, because you can do the takeoff and landing a normal two-pilot operation, and should the shit hit the fan during the flight, then you could call on the other pilot to come back to the flight deck. But obviously, you've got relief pilots and things like that, so sometimes four pilots sitting on a flight. Now maybe you can reduce that entirely just to two pilots.
Yeah, I get what they're saying is, like those ULR flights.
Yes.
Instead of taking four, two's necessary.
Yeah.
I suppose.
And then, but like I say, but the Europeans convinced, no, it's just going to be single pilot ops, solo. That's it. You're in the aircraft by yourself. But yeah, so differing opinions on how it may work. And I suppose this is one of the things that's going to change from authority to authority across the world. Single pilot ops in the US might be very different to single pilot ops in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
So,
but there's so many ways that they're going to be able to slice that if it gets approval.
Yeah. As more news comes out about that, obviously we'll report on it. But I think at the moment there's nothing concrete to say this is how it's going to be. But we've spoken about the lobbyists and that at the beginning. Now, obviously, they're going to be very clever about how they lobby for single pilot ops. And you can be guaranteed that there'll be some fine print there to show that in extreme cases, when two pilots is not available, the company may use one pilot on this occasion. A little bit like extending your FDP by a couple of extra hours.
Yeah.
If you've got a reason for it. So, I'll keep an eye on that one. But nonetheless, thanks for the comments, everyone, from last week. Awesome to hear from everyone. And again, the best part, Ryan, and you would agree with this, I know, it's certainly not the money we make from the podcast, is the connections that we make with people across the world that actually comment and tell us that, hey, this is what's happening. Mate of mine, Cole, sent me a message. He was in his aircraft, sent a picture in the flight deck, said, I'm just about to fly to Melbourne, and quick little snap there. And it's just so cool to know that, our listeners are all around the world flying nice machines and enjoying life as a pilot.
Yeah, no, it's incredibly awesome. I mean, every week the little sort of network grows a bit more, and you get messages from new names every week, and it's awesome. I mean, the guys have such nice comments and things to share with us, and that's what keeps us going.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it.
Ryan, you like your headphones, eh?
Which ones? You're talking about the ones I'm wearing right now?
Yeah, well, we're looking at getting new headphones. But so, nice article in Simple Flying the other day. How have in-flight entertainment headphones evolved over the years? So do you know, it was only introduced already introduced in 1963 on a TWA flight. And also used on the German airship, the Zeppelin airline company in the mid 1930s. The passengers there, they had a piano bar, smoking lounge and dining bar for use on the 2.5-hour flight between Europe and America. Following World War II, 16 millimeter films on long-haul flights became the norm.
Yeah.
But with noisy piston engines still powering the aircraft, it was nearly impossible to hear the soundtrack. This prompted airlines to seek a solution to the sound problem, that they would deliver audio, how they would deliver the audio to the passengers. So in 1961, TWA approached product maker Avid and asked them to build that headset that later got used by 1963. So they were inspired by medical stethoscopes. The first pneumatic headsets entered service.
I remember the pictures of those things.
Yeah.
It was quite funny, yeah. Everyone sat there.
Yeah.
Looked like they were, yeah. So those are pneumatic.
Yeah, pneumatic. So standard in form, the pneumatic headsets were nearly identical from one airline to another. So it doesn't matter who you were flying with, all the headsets were the same.
Yeah.
Everything changed when Japanese electronics company Sony introduced the Sony Walkman in 1979. Airlines had no interest in the Walkman, but were blown away by the inexpensive electronic headset they saw as a replacement for the pneumatic headsets. Pretty cool, eh? So when do you think Delta stopped using pneumatic headsets?
No idea.
2003. Yeah, quite late on. Eh? And later on, 1989, Bose Corporation introduced its first noise-cancelling headphones designed for use on an airplane. And they could be powered by the aircraft, electricity system, or NICAD batteries. And obviously noticing how that cancelled the noise of the jet engines, American Airlines began offering them to passengers in first and business class in 1999. That was the birth of the Bose Quiet Comfort that we're wearing now.
Yeah. I tell you what, and these are the best headsets on the market at the moment. The only reason I actually have this pair was because I was traveling up to Paris for sim training, and the neighbor sitting next to me was making god-awful noises the whole damn night.
You bought yours in duty-free there on the plane?
Yeah, made sure that for the trip home I would try and have some quiet comfort over my head. And I tell you what, best purchase I ever made, because I use them for every simulator trip. I still use them sometimes now for long-haul flights when I do go on them. And then they're obviously getting a tremendous amount of use out of the podcast.
Yeah.
Although
Ours are quite old now, actually.
They're actually outdated by a model.
So these are the Quiet Comforts, and obviously you get the, I forget the name of the mic, U-Fly mic that you can connect to it.
Yes.
And use it. That's what we did. But obviously there's the new, not the A20 was out forever.
No, it's the A30.
The A30.
Yeah. If I see one more advert about a Bose A30 headset, I think I'm going to China.
But I'd be interested to know, anyone that's used an A30, or what you think about it. I'd love to know if it is that much of an improvement. Yeah. The Bose A20s were out forever, it seems like.
I think that's probably why there was such an outbreak and a hype, when these A30s hit the market, because those A20s, they've been around for about 10 years. Yeah. I suppose it was about time for a bit of an upgrade.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, that's it from my aviation news. But I did Jiu Jitsu last night, so I want to chat about it. Is that okay?
Well, how am I going to stop you, really? if I try, you're probably going to headlock me. So,
no, I want to give a shout out to the guys that I do Jiu Jitsu with on a weekly basis. The guys at SBG in Bedford View. Right, and this is by far the coolest thing I've ever done. The podcast was, when we started the podcast, it was so difficult for us. We spoke about now 120 episodes to get to the point where you're comfortable. And the nice thing with a podcast is that it's difficult, but no one's trying to strangle us while we're doing it. Whereas with the Jiu Jitsu, it's just as difficult, if not more so, but at the same time, there's another guy that's actually trying to wring the life out of you.
Yeah.
Not so much. It's not really about that. But yeah, I really do want to give a shout out to the guys there that have helped me, just, I suppose, give me the confidence to keep the discipline going, to keep going and doing it. Jocko put out a post the other day, I showed it to you, about the difference between motivation and discipline. Now, when you've got the motivation to do something,
the discipline will follow.
Yeah, but when you've got the motivation, you don't always have that motivation. Sometimes you don't. I mean, and it's one of the things. I mean, training now, we start at 7 o'clock in the evening, can be, sometimes you think, well, it's going to be a hell of a lot easier just to stay home and watch Netflix or something. But you don't. You go. You've got to be disciplined and actually go and do it. But you've got to enjoy it enough and feel the benefits of it enough to realize that having that discipline is important.
Yeah.
And, motivation is one thing, but having that discipline there is something else. But you can only get that when you're doing something that you can actually see the benefits of. And I know for a fact with yourself, the podcast helped you tremendously at the beginning become a different person, because it's not natural to sit down every week with a microphone in front and talk the way we do, because we're also not interviewing. So a lot of what we're speaking about is you and me actually talking. And it's not a natural thing. You have to develop that over time. And it did take a hell of a long time to actually get there. But what got us to the point now where we do enjoy sitting here and having a conversation is the fact that we had the discipline to every week come and sit here and do a podcast. And yeah, so the shout out, and I suppose, what I want to say, and I know jiu-jitsu is not everyone's cup of tea, and it doesn't matter what it is. To pick something and try as hard as you can with it and have the discipline to continue with it and just see what happens is a remarkable thing, particularly when you can sort of separate yourself from it and look back and try and assess what it's doing for you in a personal sense. And one of the remarkable things with the jiu-jitsu, Ryan, is that you're developing a skill set that so few people have.
Yeah.
Let's face it, it's a hell of a skill that you're learning. It's so complicated. I mean, the guys must laugh at me there because I'm so amateurish in what I do. I just don't move the way these guys with more experience do. But you get a little bit better every week, these little gains. And remember when we started the podcast, one of the things we spoke about all the time that was addictive was that incremental gains we spoke about. When you improve every week, it becomes, hey, I want to get better. Let's get the sound better. Let's get the lighting better.
Yeah.
And that is so important to have. It's so important to have something like that in your life where you actually are working, not towards an end goal. I'm not doing it so that I can compete and be the best in the world. I'm doing it for me on a pure personal level. And how many people do things like that for themselves, just for themselves on a real personal level? I think very few.
Yeah.
To have something like that where this is just for you, just to develop something and see what happens. You're not so sure. You're not developing it for any one particular reason. I think it's really, really cool. And so I've got a hell of a kick out of it. But I owe the guys there a real thanks for enduring me there and teaching me the odd thing, because I really am loving it. It's one of the coolest hobbies that I've ever done. And and I said, how's it different to the podcast now? Well, the podcast is now a firm part of what you and I do on a weekly basis. And we've often said, we've got to turn this into a business at some point. We're going to have to, this is what we love doing, and we're not stopping it for anything. But when something becomes that, then you must have something else that you're doing that is, you understand what I'm
totally
saying?
Get it. I mean,
slightly separate from, you know, And I just love that Jordan Peterson quote where he says, work as hard as you can on at least one thing and see what happens.
Yeah.
And that's what it's all about. So, yeah, big shout out to those guys. Thanks for your support there. I'm really enjoying it.
Wow, that's really cool, man. No, I totally get it. I mean, you need to have something on the side that, keeps you going and that you can obsess about on the side. I mean, that's the same with me. I enjoy the guitar a hell of a lot. Something I've really, really taken to. And I love every opportunity I get to just go and sit there and smash a few tunes and learn this instrument. And the skill that comes with it. It's really, really cool to be learning something new at this age as well. That's so different. And, well, don't stop it. But
no. One of the things I love, and you would have seen this too, is when you get a new hobby, whatever it is, it takes you down a whole different path of YouTube videos and this book and that. You wouldn't have done that before, but it's opened up other sort of avenues of insight that you now start diving into. So I love that part about it. It's just awesome. But that's not my advisory. I've got an advisory for you. It's actually for you this week.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, this one.
Atomic Habits by James Clear. I've mentioned it before. But the one thing we spoke about in the week, you and I both want to do a bit more weight training. Don't get time to go to the gym. Forget it. Ain't going to happen. But nothing wrong with buying a couple of dumbbells and having them at home.
Yeah.
The problem with that is they don't, doing curls doesn't exactly fit into your daily procedure at this point. So in Atomic Habits, they speak about, it's called the habit stacking technique. So it involves linking a new habit to an existing one by identifying a regular activity you already do and then attaching the new habit to it. So for example, if you want to start lifting weights, Ryan, you could stack it with your existing habit of working at your home computer. So leave the weights next to your computer there at home, and every time you go sit down to go do a bit of work on the computer, which I know you do a lot of at home, you go and do 20 or 40 curls before you sit down at the computer, and it does a couple of things. Now when you sit down at the computer, let me tell you feel a hell of a lot better about yourself already just before you're about to do something productive.
Yeah.
And two, you've actually done a bit of exercise. But it doesn't take you long in doing that before it just becomes a habit.
Another habit, yeah.
So if you want to drink a glass of water in the morning or something, even if you look at that as a healthy habit that you want to start, well then the way you would do it is you brush your teeth every morning. So leave a glass of water next to your toothbrush, and that will encourage you to drink the glass of water before you brush your teeth. Do that for about 2 weeks, and it's no longer something you have to try and remember to do. It just becomes a habit.
Yeah.
So that's my advisory this week. Atomic Habits by James Clear. It's an awesome book. And the habit stacking technique is well worth it.
That's a sage advisory, what? I like it.
You like it? Yeah. Give it a go.
Off to go and buy some weights after the podcast.
Yeah. F1 this weekend.
Yep. Azerbaijan. First race in, what's it been, 3 weeks since the Australian one. And that was a bit of a letdown of a race. So I'm looking forward to seeing some awesome action this weekend.
They've changed the format a little bit. Have you seen?
They have, yeah.
So Friday they're doing you're going to have free practice on Friday and then qualifying for the race on the Friday, and then the sprint race on the Saturday.
And then, yeah.
So the sprint race is not going to determine the grid for the main race, which I think is brilliant, because everyone in the sprint race was always so cautious, not taking any risk, because they just wanted a decent spot on the grid for the main race. Now the sprint race, I hope I'm understanding it right, it's just going to be a standalone race, and the qualifying for the actual Grand Prix will be on the Friday, so don't miss that tomorrow.
There was a bit of an interesting hiccup that I'd heard about earlier in the week. It was actually Marcel, my mate, that was telling me about it. So apparently Pirelli hadn't allocated enough tires for this particular race.
Well, this could be because of it, yeah.
So there might be a bit of, arm wrestling around the strategies because of the lack of availabilities of tyres to the team. So, I think it's going to be interesting to watch.
That makes sense.
Oh, still hoping for my top three.
Yeah.
Verstappen, one of the Ferrari boys, and I want to see Alonso on the top three.
Alonso will be there, I'm sure.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Well, thanks for coming in on a public holiday, Paul. I'm sure the listeners appreciate it. What would they do without listening to us?
Well, I hope so. And, especially the guys that obviously sponsor us and support us.
Yeah.
Our Patreon pledges.
Yeah. Big shout out.
Guys, thanks for all the support.
And we've got a new one, eh?
Yes. John Kearney.
Thanks, John.
But thanks very much, man. we absolutely appreciate it. And again, that's why we keep going.
It goes a long way. Thank you, guys. Thanks, Paul.
Take it easy, good.
Have a lovely weekend.
You too, man.
Bye for now.
Ciao.